welcome you to CCL's training today. This is part of our weekly webinar program of Citizens Climate Lobby that provides CCL supporters with access to in-depth learning opportunities on topics related to climate change and effective climate advocacy. Since this is happening during our regular liaison call, I'm the one who's your host today. I'm Mindy Ahler as the Liaison Program Manager. And our topic today is the Fall 2025 Lobby Training number 2, reviewing our primary asks and lobby meeting plans. So our speakers today, we have Jennifer Tyler, who is CCL's Vice President of Government Affairs. With years of experience on Capitol Hill, Jen leads our legislative strategy and engagement with members of Congress, ensuring that our policy work is timely, impactful, and aligned with the changing political landscape. And we have Dana Nuccitelli, who is our Research Manager for CCL. He's a well-known climate science communicator and environmental science who translate complex scientific findings into accessible, actionable insights for volunteers and policymakers. And Dana plays a key role in grounding CCL's policy work in the latest research and evidence. And I am Mindy Ahler, the Congressional Liaison Program Manager, and I guide and support our Congressional liaisons in their incredible work to build strong, respectful relationships with their members of Congress. And I mentor our volunteers and equip them with the tools and techniques you need to be effective in lobbying Congress. So our 3 learning goals for today: we will briefly review CCL's fall lobbying ask. We'll just touch on them because we covered them in depth on Thursday, and you can go back to that training and listen to the recording if you want even more of the details. But then we'll also review a few tools to help you in planning your meeting, and we will leave plenty of time for questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jen.
All right. Thanks, Mindy. And thanks, everyone. Over 200 of you on the call. I appreciate you joining us. Hopefully we saw most of you last Thursday night. So this is going to be, in the beginning, mostly just a recap. I'm going to run through really quick what our asks are and some of the framing and maybe some additional tidbits here and there. But then we'll leave the vast majority of time for Q&A so we can get into things. So first, our lobby day asks. This chart, easy thing to kind of keep coming back to if you get confused, but we did try to simplify our asks this lobby day. For Democratic members of Congress in the Senate and in the House, there's just 2, permitting reform and fix our forests. Now, there's not really a primary and a secondary. Those are both kind of co-primaries, so we're hoping you fit both of those into your lobby meetings. On the Republican side, if you have a Republican Senate office you're meeting with, you're going to be talking about permitting reform and fix our forests as well, same as what you would with a Democratic office. The only difference is for House Republicans, we're not going to talk to them about fix our forests because they all voted in favor of it. And instead, we're going to talk to them about permitting reform and replace fix our forests with the foreign pollution fee ask, which is another way of saying CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So really, House Republicans are the only ones that have a little distinction. Everyone else, we're talking permitting reform and fix our forests. House Republicans is permitting reform and the foreign pollution fee ask. So with that, I realized on our last call on Thursday, we didn't have a time to really celebrate. I saw someone in the chat saying, let's stay positive. Well, I agree. We should bring some positivity into this. We go into these lobby days and we obviously have these goals we set in terms of how many offices we reach, how many volunteers, are here and trained and advocating and hopefully getting our messages across and having our asks accomplished. But coming into these lobby days, we've already done so much work. So I want to take a moment to really highlight that, the work that starts before we hit the hill, before we have these meetings. And so since June of this year, we've really generated a lot of positive momentum on both our co-primary asks, which is permitting reform and fix our forests, outside of lobby days. We've had over 10,000 calls to congressional offices and over 50,000 emails to congressional offices. In addition, we've had targeted op-eds and letters to the editor published all across the country on both of these topics. And I really want to highlight the one positive. We've heard a lot of positive remarks on permitting reform and how this advocacy has helped members get more engaged, but we just saw the Fix Our Forests Act pass the Senate Agriculture Committee. And before that, we did another round of calls on Fix Our Forests to those committee members. We did op-eds, letters to the editor. We had liaisons engage. And After that, there was a markup that had a vote of 18 to 5. So a significantly bipartisan vote coming out of that Senate Agriculture Committee. And I talked to a Senate staffer who was one of the lead staffers on the bill after that vote, and they told me very clearly that our advocacy helped them have such a strong bipartisan vote in markup. We were one of the few grassroots groups that was really doing all we could to get the word out on this bill and talk to offices and really let them know how important this is from a climate perspective. So, just an amazing success already going into Lobby Day, having that bill move out of the Senate Ag Committee and be marked up. Now, obviously, there's more work to do. We want to get that across the finish line in the Senate, get it through the House, get it signed into law, and we want to get a permitting reform package formally introduced. So, there's still more work to be done, but I want us to make sure we pause and remember that going into these lobby days, we've done so much and already had so many successes that are going to set us up for these really positive conversations going forward. So kudos to all of you for all of that great work. All right, now we'll dive into our asks. So permitting reform, and this is an ask for every single member of Congress, every Republican, every Democrat. The top line ask is we want them to negotiate and pass a bipartisan comprehensive permitting reform package. Now, our goal is for them to really understand that permitting reform is necessary to do right now. There's definitely an awareness, I think, amongst every member of Congress that permitting reform is a good thing to do. It's something that will need to be done. But the question is when and how soon does it need to be? Our response is it's urgent. The climate crisis is urgent. These needs, reliability, affordability, all of this is urgent. We need to do it now and seize this opportunity. Now, the messaging, I just gave a little, prelude to that. The messaging is going to be different for a Republican and a Democrat, but the top line ask is the same, and the details of any final permitting reform package that we think will be included, those are the same as well. And what we'd really hope you guys highlight in your meetings, two things, in addition to figuring out how to message this to your specific member, which I'll talk more about in a minute. We want you to highlight the Problem Solvers Caucus framework, permitting reform framework, and the National Governors Association letter on permitting. And so I'll let Dana really quick go over those last two pieces, that framework and that letter, to tell you a little bit more about those and how you might bring those up in your meeting.
Yeah, so these are two really good resources that are very bipartisan and give us some detail about what we can expect to see in a comprehensive permitting reform package. So the Problem Solvers Caucus is a group of 49 members of Congress in the House, roughly half and half Republicans and Democrats. And so they released this very broad, comprehensive list, this framework of stuff that they would like to see in a permitting reform package. It was broadly very similar to the Energy Permitting Reform Act that we advocated for last year. Lots of good stuff on transmission. One aspect that I didn't highlight last Thursday was on interregional transmission, because we're okay at building transmission within regions where individual utilities or grid operators can kind of handle the whole thing within their region, but we're terrible at building transmission that connects different regions to each other because there's no motivation for grid operators and utilities to do that. It kind of introduces a little bit of competition from other regions, which they don't want to do. And so we really need to create some kind of incentives for that kind of interregional capacity so we can connect these different parts of the country to each other and share the cheap, clean energy between different regions. That's one good aspect that this framework highlighted, that we should have the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission kind of require that regions put together plans for this interregional transmission capacity. Lots of other stuff on NEPA reform, on other types of clean energy permitting like geothermal and nuclear and hydropower, judicial reform, lots of good things like that if you want to look at what the details of what a broad comprehensive package would look like. And then the Governors Association put out a letter that was very similar in kind of its outline of what what these governors would like a permitting reform package to look like. 13 governors, again, very bipartisan, from very red states like South Dakota and Wyoming, very blue states like Massachusetts, Rhode Island. So very broad, very bipartisan, also very similar to the Energy Permitting Reform Act, lots of similar stuff on transmission. The governors actually said that they would like for states to be able to kind of provide where they would like interstate transmission lines to be built. So they kind of wanted, like, the governors wanted a little input on building more transmission, which was also good. But in general, these are both very good resources to point to if like an office asks you for details, or to come up with individual aspects of permitting reform that you would like to highlight that might be of interest to your particular members of Congress.
Awesome. So now we'll talk about the specific kind of messages that you want to deliver when you're talking permitting. I think those two previous resources Dana just went over, the framework and the letter, that's a really easy way to kind of set the tone for your conversation on permitting reform, going in and talking about there's been all this momentum on permitting reform. We're not coming in and we're talking about an issue that people aren't discussing or there's not support for. We want to show there's this problem solvers framework that's tremendously bipartisan. Members are already engaging and putting their names down in writing behind policies they support. There's 13 governors, bipartisan states, supporting and urging Congress to pass permitting reform. And so there's a clear momentum, there's clear energy behind this. And what we want to do is then tell our member, you see all this energy? We want you to join that train and help get this thing done. And then I would lean into these more specific messages. So for Republicans, affordability, saying something like, our energy prices are going up, doing a quick Google search on your state or your region and figuring out how much energy prices are going up or are they projected to go up. That's an easy talking point as a constituent to talk about how that's going to impact you directly and your family. Reliability, maybe you're in an area with blackout, brownout threats. Maybe you've had a recent storm that had pretty disastrous impacts in terms of energy reliability. That's an easy thing to start highlighting for your member of Congress. Make that more connected to your personal life if possible, or your local community, because that's going to help it really resonate with your member. And then the last point for Republicans, global energy leadership. This one might be a little harder to make it a personal point, but really highlighting some of the concerns that Republicans have had about this global clean energy race and the fact that China and other countries are really beating us in terms of developing, permitting, getting these technologies up and running. And we need to be able to compete with them, not just for ego sake, for America to lead, although I think America leading is a key highlight there, but for our economy, for industry, for jobs, keeping these things on American soil. So we're supporting this industry that's so important. And that might be a good place you could talk about local industry. If there's, local projects, local companies that you think might be benefiting from that, like we maybe talked about with the tax credits on reconciliation, that's an easy thing to highlight, the local jobs, the local impacts to industry and to the economy. So those are those 3 points for Republicans that you can try to make as relevant to your specific member of Congress as possible. For Democrats, on the other hand, there's not 3 kind of co-equal points. The top most important point that I want us to say to every single Democratic member is that we cannot afford to wait on climate action, and that permitting reform is climate action. So Democratic members, we have a little bit of a harder time indicating to them that this is an urgent issue that they need to do now instead of waiting for another administration or another Congress. So we want to make the point that permitting reform is our biggest shot right now to address climate change. It's going to have a significant impact, reducing emissions, all of these climate benefits. So we want to make that connection. Permitting reform is climate action, and the climate crisis is urgent enough that we have to take that action now. So we want to say that to everyone, and that's an easy place to chime in with your specific why. What is your climate why, right? Why are you here showing up? Why is climate important to you? That's an easy place to fit that in. The other 2 issues are the same ones we talked about with Republicans, affordability and reliability. And again, making that as personal as you can, connecting it directly to your member of Congress, talking about your community, talking about issues that you know are going to be relevant to your member of Congress. That's the best way to communicate those points. Now we'll move on to FOFA, so the Fix Our Forests Act. The top line ask for everyone is to vote in favor of the Fix Our Forests Act. There's a little difference for senators. We want them to support the bill when it comes to the Senate floor. For House Democrats, what we're asking is for them to support the Senate version when it comes back from the Senate and goes on the House floor. So that's the only little discrepancy between the two, but it's the same top line ask for both of those. Now, the messaging for Democrats and Republicans on this, again, are going to be a little bit different. So let's go into those real quick. For Republicans, we want to talk about protecting lives, property, infrastructure, right? That's another really easy way, especially if you're from a Western state, to talk about what that might mean to you personally, the threat to your home, the devastating impacts on local communities if you've been near a wildfire. And especially the infrastructure implications. You know, the federal government spends a lot of money on infrastructure. It's key to our national security. Some of these fires are really threatening our infrastructure. Another point, restoring the health of our forests. A lot of Republicans are keen on conservation. They understand the importance of our national forests for recreation, for natural resources, for all sorts of things. And so we want to talk about, the degradation of the health of our forests because we haven't been managing them and how this is going to positively impact the health of our forests, restore them, bring them back to where they once were. And then taxpayer dollars. There's a lot of money spent not only on addressing wildfires when they're happening, but also rebuilding afterwards. That's federal dollars, there's state dollars spent, local dollars. So that taxpayer dollar concern is a big one for Republicans. And if you can make that personal too, that's a great way to address that. For Democratic members, that top one is pretty similar to Republicans, protecting lives and property. So, talking about those local impacts, the wildfires that have happened. The third piece of that is a little different, public health. So, especially if you're not in a Western state, but even if you are, this is one of those impacts that touches the whole country is the smoke pollution that goes all across our country. Democratic members and Republicans, but Democratic members more particularly, are really concerned about that public health impact. So highlighting that, the smoke pollution and the need to bring that down by reducing these mega fires, that's a great selling point for this piece of legislation. Protecting our forests and reducing carbon emissions. This is that point, which kind of ties into what we mentioned for Republicans, talking about conservation, making our forests healthy, talking about endangered species and biodiversity, preserving all of that, but then also tying that to carbon emissions. This is a climate bill. That's why we're advocating for it, right? We don't advocate for endangered species bills on their face, but this is a climate bill for us. This is a carbon emissions reduction bill. And so we really want to highlight that point for Democratic offices that not only are we preserving the biodiversity, preserving endangered species, protecting the forest, but that's also going to reduce those carbon emissions by preventing these big mega wildfires. And lastly, expediting critical forest projects without weakening core environmental safeguards. So they'll know, this bill, what it's doing is expediting critical forest projects, among other things, but that's one of the core tenets of the bill. We want to make the point that that happens without rolling back, weakening, or cutting into NEPA or the Endangered Species Act or any other environmental safeguard. We feel confident that this is upholding those environmental safeguards, and this is striking a careful balance, this bill is, between making sure we can do projects more quickly to address the urgency of this crisis, how quickly wildfires start, but doing that without sacrificing all of these important checks. And we created a little resource document to give you a little more info. I'll pass it over to Dana to talk more about that.
Yeah, we hope this is a useful resource for answering some questions and bringing up some important points relating to FOFA in lobbying. You can find it at cclusa.org/FOFA concerns. So there's three different sections. The first section addresses some of the primary concerns that we hear about people who are worried about FOFA. So you can see the top one here, the most frequent one that we hear is that, as Jen mentioned, concerns that the bill is going to roll back environmental regulations and basically open up, as people say, millions of acres to industrial logging and clear cutting. And so what we did is we looked at the bill itself and tried to address these concerns by saying, here's what the bill actually does. So in this case, the concern is that FOFA is expanding the categorical exclusion, which is part of the NEPA process. It's one way to do environmental permitting you can either do a categorical exclusion or environmental assessment or environmental impact report. Those get more detailed as you go. And so for wildfire mitigation projects, it's a categorical exclusion. That's how it's done 80% of the time by the Forest Service. And that was established in the Healthy Forest Restoration Act in 2003. And so what FOFA does is it amends that bill to expand the categorical exclusion from 3,000 acres to 10,000 acres. And in that bill, it says if you're going to do these wildfire management projects, you have to retain old growth and large trees as much as possible, consider the best available scientific information, and so on and so forth. And so that is inconsistent with rampant logging and clear cutting. And so if you look at the specifics of the bill, it basically contradicts this concern. This concern would not be consistent with FOFA. So we've got a bunch of those. We've got 2 other sections in this resource document, and another one is useful for the House, especially House Democrats, since we're not lobbying House Republicans on FOFA. But since we're asking them to vote for the bill when it comes back to the Senate, to the House from the Senate with those changes, we've listed the changes in the Senate version compared to the House version. Things like it added a wildfire intelligence center and tribal forest protection management activities, and so on and so forth. So that'll be useful if you're lobbying House Democrats, asking them to vote for the Senate version of FOFA. And then finally, there's a third section on noteworthy provisions, which are sections of FOFA that we think are particularly useful and of interest potentially in talking to your members of Congress. So you can look at those and see if any of those kind of ring as something that your member of Congress might find interest learning about.
All right. And before I dive into our last ask, I just want to highlight, I think Brett put this in the chat, but so that document we put together hopefully is going to be tremendously helpful for you all. It is a document we put together for you, so it's meant to be internal to CCL. It's not something we'd like you to bring to your lobby days or share with congressional staff. There is another FAQ document that some of us in a coalition, a national level coalition on FOFA, have been working on for congressional staff. So really just keep that document internal, but use it as you prepare for your meetings. And if a question comes up during your meeting that you're unsure exactly how to answer, that's a really easy thing to refer back to after the meeting and then send a follow-up. Say, I'll get back to you on that. And you can always come to me afterwards, and I'm happy to connect with the office. But maybe it's something you can find the answer to in that document and then share via email. All right, so the foreign pollution fee, that's going to be our ask, our co-primary for House Republicans, in addition to permitting reform. And the top line ask is support foreign pollution tariff legislation. This is the same ask we had back in July for the Senate side. So if you'll remember, in July, there was more momentum on the Senate side, and that's when Senator Cassidy's foreign pollution tariff legislation was coming out. So we were, getting support going on the Senate side. Now we have a little bit of a lagging support issue on the House side. So we want to correct that. And we need to get this Republican support, particularly because, having Democrats jump onto this legislation wouldn't be helpful, given that it's a Republican-led Congress and a Republican administration. That all the sponsors of the bill and the champions of this policy want to get a strong Republican lead on this bill and on this issue, get a lot of Republicans in support, and then slowly add Democratic members so it doesn't deter Republicans from joining. So the highlights of that ask that we want to highlight for folks in the messaging: fair competition for American industry. So again, highlighting local business, highlighting jobs, how unfair it is that American companies are so much cleaner, are subject to a lot more regulations, and yet they're competing with these other countries that do not have those regulations, do not have, emissions reductions goals and targets, things like that. And so we really want to level the playing field to help our businesses and our workers thrive. Accountability for polluting nations. So, of course, Republicans they frequently talk about China, but there's other countries who are right at the top of that list who really are, they don't have clean industry. And so highlighting that we want to hold those countries accountable and make sure that we're addressing that kind of global inequity. Smart targeted policy design. We're not talking about this huge, massive, broad policy. If you look at the one page, the ask sheet, you'll see it's pretty carefully targeted and tailored to different, emissions intensive industry, that sort of thing. So we really want to highlight that this isn't a broad, kind of open the door, wide piece of legislation. We want it to be as smart and targeted as possible. So a lot of industries, don't get caught up in it, or there's not a lot of confusion, but it's really effective. And then American leadership and global leverage. That kind of goes along with that accountability for other nations, highlighting that we want to win this kind of clean energy race. We want to win these global competitions with other countries in terms of our industry. And to do that, in this case, we have to address some of these inequities and making sure that we're able to kind of compete on the global stage and address all of these things. So with that, I will turn things over to Mindy, who's going to go over some reminders and a little bit more tidbits for your lobby day, and then we'll get into questions and answers.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So first of all, I know many of you have been working on bringing a trusted messenger to your meetings, and just a few reminders on that. If you are bringing them to join you, if they're going to join you live, It's really helpful if you can invite them to attend your practice meeting. I know that's not always possible, but if it is, that's a great way to be comfortable with the whole team, with the trusted messenger. But also make sure, whether they can attend that or not, that you're very clear in advance what your expectations are of their role and their message for your meeting, so that everyone feels really comfortable on that. And also, after your meeting, you want to thank them, but also continuing to engage any way that they can continue to be helpful in follow-up to the office, or in future meetings or future activities. It's really great to keep those trusted messengers, continue building the relationship with them as well. And also, if you're just bringing materials from a trusted messenger, so some people are bringing letters or a video, be sure that in your practice meeting you determine how you're going to present those materials in your meeting. And then, since our meetings are all virtual, most of them will probably be on Zoom. Occasionally, one of the offices will have their own line that they will set up for you. So if you need a Zoom line to use, you can contact your state coordinator first. They're working with our network directors on this. If you don't get what you need there, feel free to reach out to me and we'll make sure that you get a Zoom line. And while you're on Zoom, it's easy to, think about it a little differently, but we want to think about it as much as possible, just like being there in person. And the priority is always trust and building our relationship. That's always the most important thing in any of our meetings. So for one, you want to dress in professional attire, even when you're on Zoom. It does help us look like lobbyists, even as citizen lobbyists. And really important, this is part of the trust and relationship, that you don't want to record the meeting and you don't want to use any like AI note-taking tools or any kind of note-taking tools. Definitely, you can say, point to which person is your note taker for the meeting, and they will probably be typing on their computer. But just to make sure that it really makes everyone feel comfortable and that it's a very trusting and confidential meeting, not using those extra tools that might make an office nervous, are a good thing to keep in mind. So when you're planning for your meeting, right, this all starts with planning and practice for your meeting. And we do have a meeting plan document that will help you with that. Also, you want to be thinking in advance about your audience. So Jen covered lots of those general talking points for Democrats and Republicans, but we know not every member of Congress is the same, right? They are all going to be different in what exactly is their concerns. So the first thing you're focused on is, what are the concerns? What will resonate most with your particular member of Congress? And then you want to really use a lot of our motivational interviewing techniques. We have another full training on that. But to really use open-ended questions. And these are also prompted for when you're in your meeting plan document, that you can be thinking in advance of what kinds of open-ended questions you're going to use. That is those that start with who, what, when, where, why, and how. But to really help give them a chance to talk more about their concerns. Instead of saying, will you support the Fix Our Forest Act? Instead, how much do you know about this bill? What questions do you have? That's a great one all the time. What questions do you have? Or can you say more about whatever point they have just made? Or who should we be talking with to build more support in the district? So those kinds of open-ended questions are important, with that goal of having the member of Congress or the staffer talking more than half of the time. And as you're listening, you're also practicing reflective listening, affirming that that you hear what they're saying, that you are noting their messages, that you are staying non-judgmental by just rephrasing what they've said and responding to it, really helping to clarify their thoughts and feelings, what they see as the pros and cons of a bill, and what they're saying, or maybe what you think they've implied, to clarify that you're really hearing them correctly. So you always want to continue to, you can always ask them, can you say more about that? And then we have our tools. I'm not going to go over it in detail this time. We do have the Primary Ask resource and the buttons on there for the Primary Ask sheets. To avoid any confusion, right now they will download just the ones that are currently updated to the correct format. We'll have them all there by the middle of this week. So we're still working on the one for permitting reform, but the other ones should be working. If they're not working at this exact moment, I'm certain that Elena is working on them, and we'll have them working by the end of this training or by later today. So keep going back to that page for the ask sheets, but all of the talking points that Jen has been covering and that Dana have been covering, those are already there in that Primary Ask resource. And the one thing that I am going to jump out to community here and share with you is the lobby meeting toolkit, because we didn't talk about this one as much on Thursday. This is another great resource for you that has things all in one place to make it easy. So you have checklists for as a participant in the lobby meeting, or if you are the meeting lead or the organizer, the appointment setter, there's a few extra steps for you. Those are in the organizer lead tab. But here you have the link to the sample meeting plan that I was just talking about that will remind you all these things. Here's the link to that Primary Ask resource page. If you are the appointment setter, it also shows you how you can get there easily, and also the resource on what are all the meeting roles for a CCL meeting. This also will look very familiar. Here it is, that nice square block to remind you of what the asks are for this training, for this lobby week. And then you have the links to the training that you can go back and see the recording. The one for today will be there by tomorrow at the latest, so that you can go back to those pages and watch these recordings again. Also has the links to the slides. If you've missed any of the things in the chat, you'll be able to find them again there afterwards. So, and there's additional trainings that can be helpful to you that are listed on this page as well. But I encourage you to go and you can add questions to the forums as one place where you can get more answers. Also, be sure to tune in to our conference. We will have breakout sessions that will also provide more information that will be helpful to your lobby meetings. I'll unmute all lines if you'd like to share your thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great to see everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of
and
you.
everybody have a good week.
Thank you, everybody.
Save the chat.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.